It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in the control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, mate, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, g'day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 111, all the ones. And we're recording this on a public holiday, Jack. ANZAC Day, of course, here in Australia. Or as one ADF member, former ADF member, a rather belligerent fellow on Twitter. I quite like his acerbic takes. He, as I say, former ADF, he calls it Happy Flag Fucker Christmas. You're allowed to say that when you are ex-ADF. He was a sapper, as I understand it. But for all our veterans and the families of which we hope the Dawn services have gone off well, Jack, we did have an interruption at the Melbourne service today where a prominent neo-Nazi, Jacob Hersant, was escorted away for booing during the Welcome to Country, Jack. And I believe he will be charged on summons. Before we get on to that, I've got to introduce my mate, my cousin, Jack, Hong Kong Jack, all the way in Hong Kong. How are you, mate?
Well, I'm still here in Hong Kong. Unlike 2.2 million Hong Kongers who left over the Easter weekend, that's nearly a third of the population.
Wow. I was going to ask.
Who disappeared for the Easter at some stage during the Easter
weekend. It'd be fun at the airport on Good Friday, wouldn't it?
Well, a lot of them just caught the train to Shenzhen or whatever, which is about half the cost of being in Hong Kong for the weekend. But the place has had a slightly eerie feel about it.
Back to matters Australian. Jacob Hersant, who has been convicted for a number of offences, including the Nazi salute last year, September of last year, was escorted from the Shrine of Remembrance in St Kilda Road, Melbourne today, Jack. Performative stuff again from our neo-Nazi clown idiots.
We're just trying to get some publicity and relevance with this.
That's kind of what it is. I just wrote about this and the rise of sort of neo-Nazism in Australia. It's been going for a very long time. You would remember Jim Salliam, Jack, from the I think it was the Australian Nazi Party first, and then it was Australia First Party, which is lost its AEC status, and now he's running as an independent in Lindsay. He's run as an independent in by-elections, state by-elections, federal by-elections, from pretty much the tip of the eastern tip of the northeastern coast all the way down to. I don't think he's ever run in Victoria, but he's run all over the place. Jim Salliam. There's another thing we need to have a look at. The AEC has no powers on this, but when someone like Salliam says, I'm going to be a candidate, and to be honest, he doesn't get enough votes to even get his deposit back, that's 4%. He never gets anywhere near that. He's a convicted criminal, Jack. I mean, there's a lot of guys sliding onto ballot papers like Jim Salliam who are convicted of serious criminal offences and could never sit in the parliament anyway.
Yeah, my recollection is the law doesn't stop you from being a candidate. It prevents you. I think if you're convicted of an offence with a
sentence on the books of 12 months or more.
I think it's 5 years, actually, for federal.
No, 12 months. 12 months.
Is it?
Yeah, we might remember he's currently he's still a bankrupt and a candidate. Rod Cullerton running for the Great Australia Party. I think he's on the Senate ticket there, but he's certainly the leader of that party. He was Section 44'd out of the Parliament, of course, when he was elected to the Senate under the Fon banner, left Fon once he became a parliamentarian, and then was found to have been convicted under conviction of larceny as the election was held. So the High Court bounced him on that. He was also an undischarged bankrupt, so they bounced him on that. Larceny comes in New South Wales with a 12-month jail sentence maximum. So that's enough to keep you out. There's a bloke up in Dixon, Jack, who's running for the Trumpet of Patriots. And he was arrested late last year, Jack. He hadn't been through the courts yet, but he was under police investigation over a stalking matter. And when they pulled the car over, he had what can only be described as the Bunnings serial killer kit allegedly in the car. Body bag? Well, who goes anywhere without a body bag in the car? A body bag, duct tape, a shovel, and an axe. So that's there's very, very little chance of this man being elected in Dixon, but he might have a bit of an impact on the race.
Wasn't there a problem with Phil Cleary in the seat of Wills at one stage?
Yeah, again, a Section 44 matter. He was employed. Phil Cleary, the
Coburg football coach. And I was not associated with the Greens, but he's always been left of centre in his politics. He beat the Labor candidate in Wills after Hawkey retired, and but he was cast out briefly because I think he won the by-election. He did, yeah.
And that was because he was receiving money from the Commonwealth at the time. I think he was involved in education, consultations, those sorts of things, as I remember it. Yes, and of course, a Greens kid, a 19-year-old Greens kid, has been left, or not left off the ballot. I think he's still on it, but he's resigned as a candidate. And well, it's pretty clear the party didn't do its due diligence. He was a secret New Zealander, Jack.
I'd be keeping that secret too.
Well, no, they're very fine people, Jack. Very, very fine people, and tremendous sheep. YouGov poll out, Jack. Labor 33.5, LNP 31, Greens 14, One Nation 10.5, Independents 5, the Trumpet of Patriots 2. They'd be lucky to get that. Two-party preferred, that's 53.5 to 46.5, Jack. The big thing here, or the two big things here, is One Nation's vote, which was around about, I'm going to say off the top of my head, but I'll quickly look at the results of the 2022 election, where Fon got, these sites. Fon got about 7% of the vote, I think. And here we go. It was just on 5. And now they're polling at 10. So we're seeing the Liberal vote, primary vote, really come back. I mean, it's down 4 points, and it's not much of it's going to Labor. If anything, it's going to Fon and the other minors.
Which will depend on how much they get back, doesn't it, really? Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's, what we know from preference flows is that, generally speaking, Labor pick up about 25% of Fon second preferences. There has been a change to that in that Fon announced during the week that they would list the LNP number 2 on any ballot they were in any seat they were involved in. Do you think that will change the preference flows at all?
It's very hard to know that in advance.
Very hard to know it. The other thing is that Fon, party's been around for a while, and they do have a body of volunteers, of course, but do they have the numbers to get the HTVs out at pretty much every polling booth? From what I can tell, it's not going to have that much impact on the outcome. But, Jack, these are very small numbers.
There was a time when the Democrats didn't have enough people in their ground game to get their how to vote cards out at every polling booth.
Yeah, maybe
and
that's what
some
the
good
Libs do.
people,
I know where you're going.
including myself, organised for good, loyal Labor Party people to hand them out for them.
There you go. Yeah. Who said there are no friends in politics, Jack?
Yeah. We used to tell people, say, wear something environmentally sound, one of those hand knitted jumpers or something, you know.
Yeah. Look, the Australian Democrats came and went. This is the sort of history of small parties, minor parties in Australia. They tend to come and go. Fauna actually looked to be in a lot stronger position than they did even at the Queensland state election. The big thing that draws my attention, Jack, is Labor at 33.5. Well, that's a point up from where they were, and we're just going off the YouGov poll, but that's pretty much standard where everything is.
Yep.
LNP at 31, and they were at 35 at the last election. Combine those two, you get to 64.5, and I think it was 67 at the last federal election. So bit by bit, increment by increment, the two-party system is devolving, isn't it? Or the pluralism associated with the two-party system in Australia is dissolving. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I haven't given that a moment's thought. It's just happening. We can't do anything about it.
It is a global phenomenon, isn't it? We can pine nostalgically for the past, and perhaps that's what I'm doing, but definitely you will have a more stable government, more stable administration where you have the two-party system with the two parties in play. Now, both the major parties are largely the architects of their own misfortune. The LNP, of course, got to the last federal election, got rolled, but not by much, but then just refused to learn the basics of politics, and that is you've got to keep up with your constituents. So this whole idea, they haven't given up on the teal seats. They probably think they stand a decent chance in Kooyong, but not much anywhere else in any of the teal-held seats, and we might see a couple more teals elected. But the message was very clear, particularly coming from women Lib voters. We don't like your stance on climate change. We don't like your stance on a whole range of things. And rather than change and listen to their constituents, the Liberal Party just decided to go and find some other constituents that might like them. And that's the disaster that's coming their way. And if these figures hold, Labor, one, will win majority government. Two, the LNP will lose a lot of seats, quite a lot of seats. In fact, Jack, have you seen where Albanese and other senior Labor figures have been in the last week or so? They're now moving into Liberal marginals, particularly in Victoria. And then Peter Dutton, of course, said, Melburnians don't feel safe to go out and have a meal at a restaurant.
I saw where Labor was spending its money a week ago, and that was mainly in Labor seats, which surprised me. There's still a fair bit of sandbagging going on, but when I see Albanese hang around seats like Monash and things like that, they obviously think they're a chance, and that would mean, my personal view, and I know you can still you can change your mind. You think Labor minority, you might have a different view now. My personal view is that Labor's seat count won't change much. Up 1, up 2, down 1, down 2. What's your view, Jack? I still think it'll be a Labor minority government, yeah.
Yeah. I think with this sort of primary vote up a point on polling, and that's pretty much significant, you can go all the way to Roy Morgan where they're 35, or you can go all the way down to the Fin Review uses them. Just trying to think of the name of the polling company. They've got Labor at about 50, two-party preferred at about 50.5, and the coalition 49.5. So if that happens, we'll definitely be a minority government. But look, having lived through the 2004 election campaign from an opposition under Mark Latham, That was, for mine, the worst campaign I've ever seen. The one from the Liberals is right up there. I think we will be studying it for hundreds of years, Jack, hundreds of years going forward, just exactly how bad they are. They were putting Muppet heads on Anthony Albanese just yesterday, Jack, and issuing that on social media. That's how clever they've got.
Yeah, I like to see the numbers go in the frame before I start calling things the worst ever.
I know, but you've got to be bold in this business, Jack. This is an election campaign. You can't sit in the fence, minority this, minority that. My view is Labor back with about 80 seats, but anywhere between 76 and 80, really. So it's not much of and they might do better than that. The problem I've got with the Libs is just, when they had a vehicle emissions policy this week that lasted less than 48 hours without basically backflipping on it, you got to wonder who's making the calls, and then you go back and say, well, maybe there's just not a lot of talent there anymore, or what talent there is sitting on the back bench because the front benches are useless.
Well, my view of it hasn't changed. They did it. They've done a good job, and Dutton's done a good job to get them back into the game from the depths, which was the Aston by-election. But I don't think they've done well enough to win, and I don't think they're not going quite as badly as it would seem.
You can't sit on the fence. They're not going to win. They're not going to win anything. Walking the corridors of a certain conservative newspaper, there is only a deep sense of sorrow about what's coming the Liberal Party's way. I don't think it's a good thing, by the way, but it is, as I say, I think both major parties are architects of their own misfortune, but the Liberal Party doubly so, because between 2022 and 2025, they've basically left one constituency to their own devices, their blue ribbon seats, and decided that they're going to find seats somewhere else. The maths was never right. It was always ever going to be a Labor majority, a Labor minority. And rather than change to suit the views, the opinions held firmly by their constituents in their safe seats, they just moved on. You know?
Well, we'll see.
All right. Now, early polling, Jack, I know you're not a fan. I don't see a problem with it. But Darren Hinch, former senator, of course, he said, you used to have a genuine reason for voting early, but not anymore. They don't even ask you for a reason, said Darren Hinch during the week. How would he know that, Jack, if he hasn't pre-polled?
I think he was. I think he had been to pre-poll, but he may have had a reason. I don't know.
He shows you had a genuine reason. They don't ask anymore. I went to and cast my ballot yesterday, and the polling booths were crowded. People get out and do a lot. I mean, well, I'll be down in Melbourne on election day, so I needed to poll early. So if someone had asked me, I would have given them a legitimate answer. But the polls are busy, and a lot of elderly people, Jack, certainly in my electorate, my part of the world, who obviously dislike the idea of standing in very, very long queues.
Just before we leave the election, I saw the odds yesterday, and you're very
do the betting odds. Yeah.
You're very keen on a Labor majority. I can tell you, it's 250. That's money for jam.
250, yeah, better than even money.
And that's in. It was $15 a month ago to back Labor for a majority government. So that's in a lot, and the Liberal Party are out to $4.50. So I've got to tell you, they were $1.70, which I thought to win.
Well, they were favourites. Yeah, they were favourites. What are we talking about? Maybe February they were favourites.
Yeah, I still thought that was a terrible bet.
Someone's gone wallop on the Liberal Party. That's why.
Wouldn't have backed them at $1.70 with someone else's money.
Not even someone you'd totally dislike.
Yeah.
Buck
But there you go.
77.
So if you should be marching around to the betting shop because you're very keen on a majority Labor government. It's $2.50. There you go.
$2.50.
Money for old right.
Should have grabbed them at $15. And of course, our very good friend of the podcast, Joel Hill, has been banned from election betting after doing way too much money on the US presidential election last year. We almost got to an intervention stage there. Throwing good money after bad. Yeah, look, the odds. The odds. I've done a lot of bet tracking in politics over the years. They tend to indicate. They can indicate trends in the seat by seat stuff.
Yeah,
and I'm not seeing it. I went through the seat by seat stuff not long back, and not seeing it. So 2 more weeks. Tomorrow fortnight we'll know what's happened, or we'll at least have a pretty good insight into what has happened. It might not be very clear immediately. There might be a lot of seats in dispute, but I'm tipping a Labor majority government by a handful of seats, and Jack's gone the minority. Getting back to the early polling thing, Jack.
I got to tell you, my record was pretty good. I got the Aston by-election right, and I got the voice right very early.
We'll see, mate. You're only as good as your last call, mate. So we'll see how you get on with that. Imre Salazinski, who has been a Liberal staffer, former colleague of mine at the Australian, he said of early polling, it's not a good trend. Everybody should go to the polls with the same information potentially available to them. Sorry, I got to laugh. Anything could happen in the next 11 days. Well, if you're a Liberal man like Imre certainly is, you'd be hoping that the next 11 days are going to be somewhat better than the last 11. Really, I think if you were a Liberal, you'd be supporting early voting because it's only going to get worse.
Quite possibly.
Only going to get worse for them.
I remain not a fan of early voting, but there you go.
Yeah, well, so you just prefer everyone just pile up there, disabled people, elderly people, just pile up and stand in front of a queue all day?
No, elderly people and disabled people have always been able to vote at a time that suits them. I just don't think it should be general.
Well, I saw this yesterday that there was a disabled elderly lady who's been well taken care of, but at the same time she had to go and stand in a 15-metre queue anyway, and wait till someone from the AEC came out and offered us some assistance. So it's not an ideal.
That didn't used to happen because there were so few early votes.
But yeah, look, I think my view is quite strong in that people should be allowed to vote at their own convenience. They should be able to contribute towards democratic processes in this country at their own convenience. All right, McNamara, Jack. Labor has preferenced the Greens, which has upset a very strong Jewish community.
Sorry, in McNamara they haven't. McNamara, the member for McNamara, Josh Burns, insisted upon, he's the only Labor member, I think, who insisted upon an open preferential deal.
How's that going to work for him, Jack? Given
I think
he'll still Green vote there.
Sorry?
There's going to be a fairly significant Green vote in McNamara.
Yeah, I think he'll still get up.
He was
because there's a sizable Jewish vote as well.
Yeah, there's also been a redistribution there, which makes it a little bit more winnable for Labor, and that Kooyong, basically a big chunk of what was the Prahran-based seat that got the flick? I can't think of the name of it, but a great big chunk of Turek voters have been added to Kooyong now, and some of the perhaps we might think more voters more likely to vote left of centre have gone into McNamara. So I don't have the numbers available, but where else has this occurred, Jack? In Sydney?
He's the only one, as I understand it, who's got an open preferential.
But not Mark Dreyfus in his seat, Jack.
No, not Mark Dreyfus in his seat. And this is causing a fair bit of consternation in the Jewish community because there's a real divide now between the Jewish community and the Greens.
There is. That's another thing that's become pretty obvious as the campaign has worn on. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry, the president there, I should say, is Daniel Aguillon, and he expressed his deep disappointment at Labor's decision to trade Mark Dreyfus's preferences with the Greens. I suspect Mark Dreyfus he's worn a lot, really, in the last 3 years after the October 7 attack. There must be times when he must have wondered whether politics is a rather brutal game for him.
Well, he's in a very difficult position, isn't he?
Yeah, that is. It is a very difficult position, and it's a lot easier for the Greens to spout their nonsense while he's got to offer some discipline. Just for some background, McNamara is the site of the Adass Israel synagogue, which was firebombed. Now, someone has said, I don't know, did you get this from the Australian? It looks like the Australian.
Yes, it is from Australia.
Firebombed in an anti-Semitic attack last year. I'm not sure that that's the case. Certainly I would not be saying that. There have been no arrests, and we do not know the motivations of the arson or the arsonists. And we might also remember, listeners, that the Adass Israel community were also those who were not forthcoming. They basically offered their protections to a teacher who fled to Israel and had to be dragged back kicking and screaming over child sexual offences charges. And that went on way too long. Only rumour, but I have heard some rumour that the Adass Israel synagogue may have been an inside job. We don't know. That's just rumour. But certainly no arrests have been made, so we can't really talk too much about the motivations of the attack. Now, Jack, we're moving on. The Pope. Pope Francis passed away. A very good Pope, in my view. Yours?
No.
Why?
I only had one good Pope in my lifetime, and that was John Paul.
John Paul the first or the second?
The second.
The first lasted
33 days.
Only a few days. I think it got less than a month.
33, I think it was.
And there's been a lot of discussion over what happened to him. He was a different candidate. So what did Francis do that upset you, Jack? Was it climate change?
Nothing that upset me. I just don't think he was very good.
What was it? You don't think he was very good? You need to explain.
No. I think he masqueraded as some kind of populist, but he's a Jesuit, and the role of Jesuits is to be the upper middle class people who pretend to be good to the poor.
Yeah, that's pretty rough on Jesuits. I've always considered Jesuits to be the sort of intellectual driving force of the Catholic Church.
Yeah. In a way, that's true as well. But they have been intellectual driving force, but they make very poor populists because that's not who they are.
Well, I think I'm going to disagree with you, but I think the outpouring of grief around the world would tell us that Francis was well loved as a pope. I'm not sure that we would say the same thing about John Paul II. There were scandals arising through the church that he did nothing about, including the scandal of child sexual abuse, clerical child sexual abuse around the world that he did nothing about. And in the end, he was kind of a stonewalling conservative, Jack. And and then we had Benedict, and then Francis. So, which way will it swing this time? I mean, I think a lot of people, when we look at the Vatican, a lot of people expect the church to be in a constant state of change. I mean, this is a 2,000-year-old institution. It doesn't change very often or very much. And those expecting reforms and all those sorts of things are going to end up being a bit disappointed.
The people who care most about what happens with the new popes are non-Catholics. There's been a whole lot of stuff written about this in the last week or so, nearly all of it written by non-Catholics. The people who care most are the non-Catholics. Because the Catholics understand, as you said, that the church will go on, and it's a large ship and it's very hard to steer it very much in one direction or the other.
What about a Filipino pope, Jack? I mean, a lot of our priests in the Catholic Church around Australia are Filipinos.
Well, you don't have to be a priest to be the next pope. This is a job that's available to any Catholic, male Catholic underneath the age of 80. I've been sitting here waiting for a call.
Yeah, it's not going to come though, Jack, because in reality, you're going to have to be a cardinal, aren't you?
Probably. But yeah. I just thought they hadn't perhaps got to the H's in the shortlist yet.
No women? No. You said male. You did say male.
Yeah.
Well, like I say, I think a lot of people, certainly the Catholic Church has had some dark days in fairly recent times, particularly around child sexual abuse, clerical child sexual abuse. It is not an institution for changing, not very much. It's like a great big ocean liner. It moves by nuance and by degree. And it'll be very interesting. What we normally see, well, in our lifetimes, is we had Pope John Paul I, who was perhaps a progressive, and then we had John Paul II, who was a conservative. Oh, no, it doesn't really work, does it? Because Benedict was a conservative as well. And then we landed on Francis, who was the first Latin American pope. So we'll see. We'll see. It's kind of the Italians versus the rest of the world, isn't it? If you want to put it that way. In terms of the cardinal or the College of Cardinals.
They used to have the numbers, but they don't anymore. It's
changed, yes. All right. Easter, Jack. What do you got for us here? Some disgrace? Some painting of the Last Supper?
No. This was it became an occasion for some really good memes. I liked a couple of these. One had the usual Leonardo da Vinci painting of the Last Supper. There's a very good skit, I think one of the British comedy shows did, of Leonardo coming to paint the Last Supper and having a blue with them to make them all sit on the same side of the table.
Yeah, because that's not the way people sit. But anyway, yeah.
But I like this one. It was just the painting of the Last Supper with the chyron down the bottom saying, "One of you will betray me and 4 of you will get book deals."
Book deals, yeah.
I rather like that. But the best one was, again, mocked up AI painting of Jesus in his robes, surrounded by Roman soldiers, but he's got his iPhone next to his ear and he's saying, "But Mum, it'll be okay. I'll be out in 3 days, so just chill out, will you?"
He could use AI and send a message to her by text, of course, Jack, if he had the iPhone in his ear. There's not a cartoonist alive that hasn't at some point pondered a crucifixion cartoon, by the way, with one of my favourites being, "Gee, I can see my house from up here." But there's not a cartoonist who hasn't had to tackle that at some particular point. I did see, I think Greg Sheridan wrote that Good Friday was always a reminder that Christianity is still flourishing in Australia and around the world. That it is, and before I go on, I actually think that the Catholic Church, for the most part, is a force for good around the world. Incredible acts of charity around the world, and particularly in impoverished areas. But having said that, it's not an institution that is beyond criticism at all.
But
Are Australians more?
It's more than being a charity, and this is less so in the West these days. But in the third world, it still fulfills its old role. It gives people something to hang on to, which is not just do they hand out some free bickies and cheese. It's much more than that.
What is it? What more? What more do you get? I mean, it's really interesting to look at Ireland, which really was shrouded in the church for a long time, up until really less than 20 years ago. And the way its society has changed with not so much a rejection of the church, but perhaps a more levelled emphasis on it.
It's a rejection. They would have had the fastest drop in church attendance ever.
Fair enough. Well said. Yeah. And it's changing so much, Jack. The size of a household in Ireland, the average household was 7 people. So that's husband, wife, and 5 children. Now it's around 2.4. And that's just changed. That's happened in about the space of 20 years. Now, there are other social forces at work as well. None of these things are either good or bad. I was just reminded of this because I saw they used to have a competition. Sounds bizarre. The Irish Housewife of the Year. And it's one of those things that's also fallen by the wayside. And in that, they just started talking about the nature of the family and how that has changed so much in Ireland since.
Well, one of the things people get wrong, or that a lot of the commentators get wrong, you were saying about the importance of the Pope. It's a hard institution to change. But most Catholics understand this, that just because the Pope issues an encyclical that says, as Pope Paul did, that use of contraception is contrary to God and a sin, right, that Catholics will fall in line. That was absolute nonsense then, in the 60s. The use of contraception by Catholics in a country like Australia was almost exactly the same as in the wider community. Despite the new rule, they took no notice. And this is what happens with the church. So being at the head of the church and thinking you can, if you imagine for a moment that you can direct all the people in the church to follow your orders, it's just nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I think there's over 1 billion people, so it's logistically difficult anyway. And of course, the basis of Christianity is one of forgiveness. One may sin, but one will also be forgiven for fessing up to that sin, Jack. So there's always the out.
Which is very handy, I can tell you.
Very, very handy. Very handy. All right, India and Pakistan. More seriously, Jack, I don't want to make light of this, but I think an India v Pakistan test is even further away than it was last week. Oh, in India or Pakistan, I should say.
The next clash between India and Pakistan mightn't be on the cricket field.
Might not be on the cricket field. It is getting very hot there, Jack, in the Indian administered territories of Kashmir and Jammu. And tell us a little bit about what's happening there, Jack.
Well, there was an attack by some Pakistani militants, perhaps a bit hard to know how to describe them, on some people who were Indians who were kind of picnicking, Hindu Indians, and 26 of them were killed. I would characterize it as a terrorist attack. And the Indians have responded by closing some borders and threatening to cut off some water to Pakistan. And of course, cutting off water is, some people would consider it an act of war. People get very cross when they go to the tap and turn it on, nothing comes out.
Yeah. Well, yes, it is. It's a way of driving people to distraction. This has been a hot spot around one of the global hotspots for many, many years. I actually went to India years ago, wanting to go to Kashmir, and I was told once I arrived in Delhi, it's perhaps best you don't go. That was, 1985, something like that. And I didn't go. I went to Agra and Jaipur anyway, instead. But Kashmir was kind of not quite under lock and key then by the Indians, by the Indian government. Kashmir and Jammu have a predominantly Muslim population, I believe. That's part of the problem.
But they were ruled by Hindu princelings, which is why they ended up in India.
And part of this is also a sort of cartographic mess that came with the end of colonialism from the Brits. The Brits said, "Well, you Muslims can go west to Pakistan or east to eastern Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh." And of course, we've got both sides on the fence there, Jack, who possess nuclear weapons. So that's always a cheerful thought.
They do. So it's got a fair bit to play out.
It's very early days.
I think there's a reasonable argument that Pakistan should never have existed, that they should have hung on a bit longer and formed the whole thing into one Indian subcontinent and a country as well.
Pakistan is having very severe political problems at the moment. And Bangladesh, a mate of mine came home. A mate of mine rang me just after a trip to Bangladesh, and he said it was the roughest place, and he's a well-travelled human being. He said it's the roughest place he's ever been. And Bangladesh has population density 6 times that of India. And
there's a reason for that. It's a very fecund little valley there. It's very productive. That's why it's such a huge population.
Yes, my mate said when he got back, he says, "I've been to Bangladesh, so you don't have to." No sense of tourism around the place, other than perhaps poverty tourism. No sense of tourism around, and they went with a larger group. He and his mates, a couple of ex-ADF guys, were having a look around, and I said, "Well, how was Pakistan?" He said, "Look, I wouldn't be so happy about it. How was Bangladesh? Because I wouldn't be so sublime about it because they went to Bhutan afterwards, and Bhutan is a paradise compared to Bangladesh." And my mate got very, very sick while he was in Bangladesh as well. Bit of Delhi belly, or indeed Dhaka belly. All right. Well, you said here water rights are a very big deal, and they are the sorts of things that could easily lead to a broadened conflict, Jack.
They could, and it's unclear what the Indians are going to do. There is an agreement as to the use of water in the Indus Valley, and at the moment they're threatening to tear up that agreement because they can do that. They have the physical capacity to divert the water. And if they did that, I think the situation would become even more dangerous.
Unfolding, and we'll keep an eye on it in our future programs. United States always attracting our eye. I've sort of made a bit of an effort to avoid American news this week a bit. It's always almost impossible. I do know that Trump has walked back the tariffs on China. Apparently, after a meeting with executives of major retailing companies like Walmart, who said, if you don't do something about this, we're not going to have anything on our shelves. So Trump has walked that back. Sorry?
At Christmas, they told him.
At Christmas. Christmas. Well, that's a fair way off.
Yeah, no, but this is the lead time for getting stuff in. If it's not moving next month, it's not going to be there for Christmas.
Right. So he's walked it back again, mate. There was a lovely little GIF I saw on X with President Xi and President Trump playing poker, and in the first frame, Trump goes, "I'm all in," and the second frame was President Xi going, "I call," and that was that. Basically, the third one was basically all the things that he said. This is Trump. Tariff's a beautiful word. There's no more beautiful word in the dictionary and all this sort of stuff. Where are we? Other than the fact that we've got a 10% across the world, Where are we with tariffs with other countries? What agreements have been signed? Virtually none that I can see. And apparently the phone has been ringing off the hook at the White House with people wanting to do deals, but I don't see any deals. They talked about a UK-US free trade agreement, Jack, but that's all stalled. Yeah. So,
well, the UK government's still talking that up, but who knows? We'll just have to wait and see.
can I just say to you, Jack, is it entirely possible that Trump doesn't understand global trade?
Of course it's possible. A lot of things are possible.
Well, I mean, I don't think he's got a sense of it. He's tanked his own markets. There's been a run of money out of the United States at the moment, and surely he's now going to have to wear whatever economic hardship comes America's way.
Not having to get re-elected means you're free to do a few things. But anyway, we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, big dip in support for young males and from young males in polling. Not that polling, as you say, amounts to much at all. But I gather that there's a fair bit of buyer's remorse out there at the moment. Meanwhile, Jack, probably the one thing stopping Trump from really heading off into sort of totalitarian excess is the courts, and they're standing up at the moment, aren't they?
Yes, the judgment that caught my eye, I think it was yesterday or overnight, from Judge Colleen Collar-Cotterley. It's a 120-page opinion, and this is about the only one of the district judges that has really put out something that really stands up. This is a classic what they call an ultra vires judgment, that she's saying to this extent, the executive, the president are acting beyond their powers, and I'll stop that, but the rest of what they're doing is okay. What she's not doing is saying this is a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. That makes her judgment stand out because many of the judges are saying, we think this is unfair or we would prefer this to happen. And when judges start doing that, that's a problem. So
when Donald Trump gets a big texter out and signs his decrees, his presidential orders, those orders are either subject to review by Congress,
yep,
or can be reviewed by the courts.
Yes.
So this relates to one of those texter drawing signature exercises, or
he likes a fat pen. Yeah,
he does. Lots of reasons for that. And so this is in relation to Doge creeping into certain departments.
No, this is in relation to the requirement. He issued a presidential order requiring people to prove citizenship to get registered to vote.
Right.
And she pointed out quite correctly that the Congress and the states, not the president, have the authority to regulate federal elections. That means they can decide who goes to vote, and he doesn't have the power to do it. There were other things in the order that she says, well, that's not outside his power, so that can go on, right?
Oh, those things included the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of State to make voting databases accessible.
Yes.
To Doge, to Elon Musk. She determined that was within his presidential power.
Yes, that is.
And the second section directed the Department of Justice to take action against states that do not adopt Trump's requirement that mail-in ballots be received by election day.
Yeah.
So that's part of your power. This stuff must go to Congress. This other stuff must go to Congress.
And this is exactly the right way that the court should be applying the law, is to say, is this within your power? No, it's not. So you can't do that, right? But what's within your power, we're not going to interfere.
All right. And
to be honest, Congress could be revisiting all of these presidential degrees if they wished.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, so the courts are standing up, and you might argue also that some states at least are standing up. But Congress...
I would. My position is a bit more nuanced than that. The courts are standing up in this case very properly, in other cases not properly.
Yeah, okay. But when we talk about checks and balances, we're talking about the states, we're talking about the courts, we're talking about Congress. Now, I can see some standing up in states, the courts standing up, as you said, sometimes actually veering outside of their jurisdictions, but the Congress isn't doing anything.
No. and this is why presidential orders, executive orders have become more common in use, is because Congress do nothing about them. And this has been increasing over the last 30 years. It's not a Donald Trump problem; it's a 30-year problem. You know?
No, it's. I'm not even sure. It might even go back further than that, Jack. But certainly, it you get a sense of gridlock in Congress that's been going on for decades.
Yeah,
administrative gridlock. Ukraine and Russia, Jack. It was said that the Trump administration was tiring of coming together with a peace initiative, Jack. Where are we now?
Well, there is I think it's US based, a final peace deal on the table, but I don't think anyone seems happy with it. So the situation is going to go on.
It's amazing that this has taken more than a day. Because it was really, but probably less than a day. It was scheduled, all be sorted, but apparently just a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah. Are you referring to the hyperbole from the then presidential candidate?
Yeah, well, less than a day. He said a day. It ought to be less than a day, really. Yeah.
That's like the comedian saying he would come back from the dead in less than 3 days. 3 days is for losers. I'll do it in a day, maybe 2.
Yeah. Oh, the Japanese will knock it over in a few hours.
Yeah.
So this is what Russia gets. This is the offer that no one likes. Formal US recognition of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula. You could just run a line through that from the Ukrainian point of view. De facto recognition of Russia's occupation of 4 regions in eastern Ukraine, meaning the US would acknowledge Moscow controls the Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhzhia oblasts while formally considering them Ukrainian land. That sounds a little confusing, Jack. A pledge that the US would not support Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. Lifting sanctions to boost Russia's economy, which has struggled throughout its war on Ukraine. Struggled, has it? Poor buggers. Opportunities for more economic cooperation with the US, especially in the energy and industrial fields. What Ukraine gets is assistance from European military forces as a robust security guarantee following a ceasefire. The US would not be involved in this measure. Russia would return a small portion of Ukraine's Kharkiv Oblast, currently occupied by Moscow. Navigation rights in the Dnieper River, which that's in eastern Ukraine, which runs along the front lines. Assistance in post-war rebuilding, though it is unclear from where that funding would come. It's really no surprise that the Ukrainians and the Russians aren't that keen to sign off on this, Jack.
No, Zelensky's particularly cranky about the Crimean position. Yeah, this is kind of difficult to deal with because I don't think there's any realistic prospect that Ukraine ever gets Crimea back.
No, militarily would be the only way, Jack.
And I don't think that that's possible.
No, it'd be possible if you threw enough soldiers at it. I'm not just talking about Ukraine, but yeah, I am dealing with a deep theoretical. I get all of that, but what the Ukrainians are being given is virtually nothing here. And meanwhile, of course, and this is said to have angered Donald Trump, the Russians are bombing Kyiv, hitting civilian populations.
Yes.
Yeah, so we are no closer to any sort of dispute. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has said, we have a better understanding of Russian position because we've spoken to them after 3 years of no talks outside of the signal messaging. This is not our war. We didn't start it. We're trying to help end it. Now it's up to Russia and Ukraine. They must be willing to move closer to one another. And Boris Johnson, who, for all his many faults, was 100% right on Ukraine from day one, said...
And remains quite close to Zelensky, I believe.
Boris Johnson said Putin indiscriminately butchers more Ukrainian civilians, killing and injuring 100 in Kyiv, including children. And what is his reward under the latest peace proposals? The right to keep sovereign Ukrainian territory is taken by violence and in breach of international law. This is a quote from continue on from Bojo. The right to control Ukraine's destiny by forbidding NATO membership, the lifting of sanctions against Russia, an economic partnership with America, that is a Russian economic partnership with America, the chance to rebuild his armed forces for the next attack in a few short years' time. Yeah, I think Bojo's got it right there, hasn't he, Jack? There's absolutely no motive for Zelensky or anyone in Ukraine to sign a peace deal on that basis.
Yeah, it's going to depend upon just how practical people are going to be.
Well, that's just a form of surrender, what's on the table there for the Ukrainians. Anyway, Trump on social network did say, I am not happy with the Russian strikes on Kyiv, which he capitalises for some reason. Not necessary and very bad timing. Vladimir, stop. Vlad's reading. 5,000 soldiers a week are dying. Let's get the peace deal done. Yes, the Ukrainians and the Russians have completely different objectives to Donald Trump. Donald Trump just wants a peace, whatever, and so he can maybe get a million in cash from the Nobel Prize people, Jack. All right. Yeah, there was a piece written by Richard Paulfreman in The Australian yesterday. It's 50 years, the 50th anniversary of the evacuation. Today of the evacuation of the Australian embassy in Saigon. Paulfreman's article, which I read, highlighted the fact that a number of people were in fact left behind.
Almost all of the local staff were left behind, all bar one, I think. I know it's behind the paywall, but if you can find a way to read it, do read it. It's a very good piece.
Very good piece, yeah. And it also has been, and Paul Hogan was in The Australian as well, 39 years since Crocodile Dundee launched, Jack. Hogs is well into his 80s now. Had a couple of things to say there. He's not a good husband, he says. He's good early on, but drops off as the relationship develops. And he also said something that caught my eye. He said that it's a changed country now. And he was talking about comedy and what's in and what's out. And that interested me a lot. When you look at the old A Current Affair clips when Hogs was on with his mate, help me out, Jack.
John Cornell.
Yes, was on doing those sorts of things. It was all very, hugely funny at the time. I'm not sure that sort of stuff stands up these days. But we are talking 40 years ago.
It's 39 years ago today since that was launched. I guess for a few of us who are old enough, we just think, if only I'd had 10,000 in that, I'd be very happy.
I knew a bloke who worked in the rag trade down in Melbourne who did that. And he's raking in money for a very, very long time.
Dennis Lilly was an investor.
Yeah, there were a number of people who chucked in 10 here and there and made some money out of it. It remains Australia's biggest box office movie. Around about the same time, Jack, you might remember a fellow by the name of Yahoo Serious who put out a film that had a brief flirtation with fame and people watching it. I can't even think. Was it something about Ned Kelly? Yahoo Serious. Anyway, he's in court at the moment. He's a carer for a person. I'm certainly no expert on the circumstances, but Yahoo Serious was listed as the carer for this particular gentleman who's elderly, and now the elderly gentleman doesn't want Yahoo Serious to be his carer anymore, and so there's actually a move to have Yahoo Serious removed from the place. That's before the courts at the moment. And as Lisa Simpson once said in The Simpsons, when she looked at the name Yahoo Serious, says, I know those words, but they don't make any sense together. All right. We have just rolled over the first hour of this show. We've got a lot of sport to get through. Keith Stackpole passed away, I think, 84 years of age, Jack. A Victorian, of course. A Collingwood man. Of course, his father.
Carlton man.
Oh no! He played at Collingwood pretty much all his career, Collingwood district. His old man played for Collingwood Footy Club. No, very much a Collingwood man. It's a lovely little piece. I think in the Australian, but I may be wrong. A little interview with Bill Laurie, and Laurie and Stackpole were very close mates, of course. And Bill Laurie was a grade cricketer at Northcote, and Stacky was at Collingwood. And the two spoke frequently, and I think Bill said that he'd spoken to Stacky a couple of years before, a couple of days before he died. Of course, Keith Stackpole died suddenly of a heart attack. Definitely a Collingwood man, mate.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I think he gave Gene Jones his start at Carlton.
No, that's Barney Jones, mate. Keith Stackpole won a grade premiership with Collingwood and considered it his greatest achievement in sport.
Yeah, I'll have four plus
he did
with
take.
You
Oh no, he's not a Carlton man, mate. Gee whiz. He did take a great deal of interest in Dean Jones' career, but they were both opposite sides of Smith Street. Anyway, tell us a little bit about Keith Stackpole besides his grade connection. Definitely a Collingwood man, mate.
Yeah, he did start out as a middle order bat and part-time leggy, I think, didn't he?
He's a leg spinner first, had a little bit in common with Steve Smith in that respect, and it was Bill Laurie who said, "Come and open for me," and Stacky recalled, because he had his own cricket biography. He recalled how nervous he was, but I think he got a 50 debuting at either number 1 or 2. I guess Bill Laurie would be the number 1. And a very aggressive batsman, Jack, very, very aggressive hook. Played the hook shot extremely well.
Yeah, who was it? One of the more modern cricketers asked him for advice at one stage, and Stacky told him, "Don't hook to get off the mark." and this cricketer said, "Look, I'm just old enough to remember Stacky, and he always hooked to get off the mark."
Well, look, I don't know if it. I did hear that story told by a skull, Kerry O'Keefe, and that was apparently a pearl of wisdom that Stacky had offered to him. He said, "Never hook to get off the mark." He said he hooked off to get off the mark all the time.
Yeah. Harsha Bhogle had the Indian commentator said that
that was nice.
when he'd first come to Australia as a commentator, and he was working for ABC Sport, and Stacky, I think, was still working part-time for ABC Sport at that stage. He said he was one of those fellows who went out of his way to help you when he had no need to do so. He was a gentleman.
Yeah, it was a lovely little tribute from Harsha Bhogle. And Stacky, of course, was a commentator with Channel 9 when World Series cricket started. He was part of that revolution. He said it was the most exciting place to be in the world at the time, a revolution of a kind in cricket and the way it was watched. And he averaged, I think, into the 40s, wasn't he, as an opener?
Yeah,
Jack?
he's in the 40s.
I think his average will be affected by the fact that he batted 7, 6, and those sorts of things. But as an opener, he was a very good player. And of course, Bill Laurie still with us, the delightful Bill. And of course, Ian Redpath passed away, who was Stacky's opening partner for Victoria for many, many years. And the two were chalk and cheese, but got on very, very well.
Yeah, certainly a top cricketer of his time. I can remember watching him play in the late 60s, early 70s. And
it was a reminder that fat blokes have a role in the game, Jack.
He always was a jam donut or two above his best, wasn't he? You know?
Yes, indeed. All right. Do we need a send-off rule in the AFL? We saw on the Easter Monday game. Nash, I believe, for Hawthorn. Strike. You'll have to remind me of the name of the player. One of the small forwards at Geelong. Strike him with a round. With a
Ryan
round
Grice, or his name, Brian.
Brian Grice, who will miss not only that game. He was concussed and sent off under the protocols, or had to go off and could not resume play, and of course can't play this week. Now Nash has received a 4-week suspension, went straight to the tribunal. I saw Nash, with a round. It was a high impact whack. The ball was in vicinity, but it was a strike on the player. There's no doubt about any of that. But he looked immediately remorseful and put the hands up straight away. It was just heat of the moment thing. So we don't have any real go at the player, other than to say once he had done that, Grice goes off. Probably, arguably one of their most important forwards. Certainly one who's going to have to kick a goal or two to get them back into the game. And of course, Nash has no penalty. He can continue to play the game.
Yeah, I think Matthew's point was it's just a numbers question. So if you get a situation like that, it means that Geelong are down a rotation, right? And that should be evened up.
Obviously, these things can't be done at the actual time of the offence, right? An umpire can't raise the red card as they do in so many other sports, and in fact junior football and club football. Because under the concussion protocols, the umpire won't know whether that player has suffered a serious injury, a serious concussion, and can take no further part in the game, and therefore under the protocols will miss the following week. So it's like you will have to have a determination made probably 10 or 15 minutes later.
That makes it very messy.
I've never been a fan of red card send-offs in the AFL, but it's very clear from what happened. And this, it's not an isolated case. It happens probably 5 or 6 times a year. And the player who was struck and suffers concussion, that club will be at a disadvantage for the remainder of the game, and arguably the following week, because that player will not be able to play. And so I think the AFL needs to look at this. Certainly, please, AFL, can you stop the rule changes mid-season? So we shouldn't be looking at this until next year. But what would happen if it occurred during a grand final? We have had a few examples, Jack, but what would happen if it had occurred during a grand final? And clearly one side would be advantaged over the other.
I'm trying to think of the last time there was a particularly egregious example. Or you go back to 1983 and the Hawthorn player gave Timmy Watson a terrific whack.
Colin Robertson, I believe.
Yeah, early in the game. And Timmy was more or less finished for the day.
Yeah, no concussion rules in those days, so they kept playing. No.
He kept playing, but that was it for him.
I remember one Collingwood player from the 81 grand final, I can't remember the name of the Carlton player, who broke his jaw with a wild swinging arm, and the Collingwood player said, "Oh, it's buggered, it's like my jaw was just seriously broken jaw." Kept playing, but obviously wasn't the player he could have been. On the fact that he reckons it was like his jaw was, he'd broken one hinge off the jaw and it was just sort of hanging down. This is the problem with the red card, that it's going to have to happen after the event, and it could possibly wait until a quarter-time break. But what happens if it occurs 15 minutes into a last quarter?
Yeah.
So you're just not going to know about it unless you say to the umpires, you can make the call, but what happens if the umpires get it wrong?
Yes.
So it's a tough one, but, we've had order off rules for a long, long time in amateur footy, Jack. A very good friend of ours, Tony Sheehan, I remember the bounce down at Latrobe. One bloke, that was Elstonwick they were playing, has just given Tony a ferocious elbow to the head. Fortunately, Tony's head, I'd imagine quite strong bone structure around the face. And it didn't bother him at all. And so 10 seconds into the game, they were one short. And this used to happen all the time.
Yeah. There's a bit of criticism of Connor Nash for sending and making public a text to Ryan Grimes apologising. I've got no problem with him doing that at all, I've got to say.
Like I said, he was immediately remorseful. He hit Brian Myers with a round arm strike to the face, fist to the face. But you could tell he put his hands up straight away.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that the Geelong players didn't remonstrate with him was a bit of a sign that, all right, heat of the moment, we'll let it go. But it did affect. Geelong went on to win the game, of course, it must be said. So what do we do, Jack? I don't think there's an easy solution here.
Yeah, no, I anything Lee Matthews says I have a good listen to, but I don't think I can quite agree.
Well, there's been, just watching some of the footy reviews, there's been a lot of people who have come around on the the sort of footy side, on the footy commentary side of things. A lot of people who've come around who are always opposed to a red card in the AFL come around as a result of this incident. The problem I've got is that the umpires will have to make a decision based on their knowledge that will happen possibly 10, 15 minutes after the incident has occurred, and that becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're about to finish up the show. We're not done just yet, but we'll be both rushing off to watch the ANZAC Day match, Jack, at the MCG. Generally speaking, 85,000, 90,000 people there. And I did see in the papers that the people who are going to the footy today have been asked to get there 3 hours early so they can be subject to security checks. They've upped the security for some reason.
Those two chaps with the weapons on them a few weeks ago, probably.
That's right. Well, we'll get back to Anzac Day in a little while, but the SCG Trust, who operate the SCG, they gave a 16-year-old kid a 2-year ban for. It was a silly thing to do, it must be said. He flung the footy record at the Port Adelaide former Swans player. Jack, help me out.
Alir. I'm not sure he actually threw it at him. My reading was he was just gesticulating and the thing fell out of the thing.
Yeah, it might have been as simple as that.
Yeah.
So he got a 2-year ban. What do you reckon? If that gets you 2, walking into the MCG with a loaded shooter, what does that get you?
Instant execution, I would have thought, to keep it proportionate. Why I thought the SCG were wrong about this. Firstly, he's a 16-year-old kid who did something stupid. That's nothing terribly unusual about that.
But he apologised. His mother, who was sitting next to him, I gather it was his mother, was mortified. I thought, that's enough. Just go and have a chat to him. The cops had a chat to him and gave him a warning.
I was just going to say, I presume it was his mother, and she was giving him some bake. I thought.
That's enough. Maybe get the Wallopers over, and the Wallopers, wag the finger at him again.
And not
you
just
could tell
not
that
just
kid would never do anything like that again.
And not just his mother, but he was in a Swan section of the crowd. Yeah, and the crowd were, giving him a bit of, you don't do that sort of attitude, because of course Alir was a much loved Swans player for quite a while. Yeah. So
there was a view around it, Jack, before anyone realised what had happened, that it might have been a racist thing. And I know that the CEO of Sydney, the ex-Geelong skipper,
Tom Harley.
went in and spoke to Alir about what was said, and I don't think there were words exchanged at all. Alir might have, obviously did speak to the young kid and say, hey, no, do not cross the line here. You're a support. You're a spectator. You sit on that bit and stay there, and I belong here on the green bit. And I think that was probably all it was. Just seemed to be excessive, and I'm glad we don't know this kid's name and he hasn't been subject to any more, humiliations and things like that.
Well, he probably was when he got home.
I'll tell you what, I can understand his frustration, Jack, because Sydney should have won that game by 3 or 4 goals.
Yeah. Well, I actually thought Port played a bit better, but yeah, there was plenty of chances to win it.
Wow, they just smoked their chances. And, of course, this feeds into the Noah Bolter controversy. Noah Bolter, of course, in a pre-season altercation just before Christmas last year, wasn't it?
Mulwala Water Ski Club.
Or Mulwala, the New South Wales border town, twin town. And was involved was it the bowling club, did you say?
I think it's the Water Ski Club.
That's right. It was too.
Mulwala's just across the river from Yarrawonga and has a big lake there, and they're very fond of water ski.
I've been getting that wrong all the time. So, yeah, you're right. Mulwala's on the other side of Yarrawonga. Because the fellow who was assaulted, he's a Yarrawonga council worker. And he and another group were waiting for the courtesy bus to take them either somewhere else or home. And Bolter and his brother and others were there. They'd been on the booze all day. Bolter saw his brother it was just a light tap on the shoulder saying, mate, just calm down. And because the brother was going right off. He's also been charged. And I think he's been convicted. And Noah Bolter ran in, pushed the guy to the ground, then punched him 4 or 5 times in the head, and left this bloke with blood all over the place. The bloke did bring a civil action against him. That was settled for $45,000, not paid by the club, which the Richmond president was very keen to say yesterday. And Bolter was charged with the assault occasioning actual bodily harm. And then the season got underway. Well, Noah Bolter was given a 4-match suspension, which included 2 matches in the pre-season. And that suspension ended 2 days before he was due to be sentenced, Jack. And Richmond
2 days before the court sentenced him.
The court sentenced him.
Yes.
The AFL said that was all hunky-dory. We'll leave this to Richmond. So we had the odd case of Noah Bolter playing for the Tigers, playing pretty well too, by the way. He did all right. And then being sentenced for this assault 2 days later. Should he have played?
Yeah, it's a 50-50 one for me. You know, the AFL tends to make a mess of these things, I think.
I think Richmond...
They could have started out of it altogether.
Well, they more or less did, and I think Richmond a really well-run club. I think they made the mistake. They should have said, you're suspended until such a time as the court determines your guilt or innocence and sentences you. And then we'll look at it. That's what should have happened. But instead, he did play just a couple of days before he was sentenced. It was not sentenced to jail. He was sentenced to a community corrections order, which includes a curfew, Jack, which will mean that he will not be able to play night games. I know there are a few Tigers supporters out there offering their apartments to him.
Nor interstate games.
Yeah, well, he's just going to miss the curfew there. But there were people who have got apartments near the MCG offering them so Bolter could run off at 3/4 time, and I just don't think it's going to work under the curfew. Stay in the apartment. Stay in their apartment.
As I read the curfew, he's got to be at his own place.
He's got to be at his own home by 10:30, I think. Might be 10 o'clock. Yeah, I think Richmond made a blue here, and they should have been, should have been a little bit more aware of it. It actually dragged into the political world, Jack, because the Victorian Premier Jacinta Allen made her feelings known about Noah Bolter playing, and that led in turn to the former Richmond coach, and now Gold Coast Suns coach Damien Hardwick, getting involved in a little bit of a political harangue himself, saying Jacinta Allen should mind her own business and stay in her lane and make sure Victorians were safe. It was a kind of mixed message. But even Jeff Kennett has jumped up today, Jack.
To defend Jacinta Allen.
To defend Jacinta Allen. We live in very strange times.
Yeah, I've had great respect for the way Richmond's been run, particularly over the last 15 years.
Absolutely.
They had a very good president and a top-rate general manager in Benny. But he's gone, a new president, and I just don't think they handled this well.
No, they didn't. And all
for starters, they threw Adam Eze, the coach, out there to do all the answer. This is something that the general manager or the president should have been talking about. Not the
absolutely.
Coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a bit weak, wasn't it? And as I say, I mean, basically, what should have occurred there, and the sort of scandal that's sort of arisen from, is completely foreseeable and manageable. Had they looked at this at Christmas time and said, "Well, this is going to run to about there, and we're just not going to let him play until this thing is run out in the criminal courts."
However unfair, that's slightly unfair to him because he's going to have to wait until he gets a court date. But, it's still that's what they should have done. Anyway, they didn't do it.
Agree with you on that. All right. Also, we are heavily involved in AFL football, but that's just the kind of blokes we are. Tom De Koning, Jack, $1.7 million a year. Over about 10 years, I think, has been offered by St Kilda. The Carlton, when we call him the King, or the Carlton people call him the King or the Viking, we'll be able to offer him something, but not 1.7 million. Now, the talks have been put on hold, and I believe Tom has had at least 2 meetings with the St Kilda Football Club, and so he's being offered the sort of money. Well, he would be the highest AFL salary winner. Your thoughts, Jack? No, salary earner. Sorry, Jack.
The first thing I saw on social media was someone saying, "Are they going to get a Gawn and Grundy deal?" Remember, Brodie Grundy had been out injured for Collingwood for some time, and Melbourne paid a lot and paid him a lot to move across. And they found that having the two of them there together just didn't work.
So St Kilda do have a good ruckman.
They do. Rowan Marshall's a very good player.
Very good ruckman. The only thing I've got about this the only problem I've got with this parallel is that Tom De Koning would be going across as the Gawn, not the Grundy. So because TDK, if he has the sort of season he's looked like, he's been a little bit quiet last week or two, still having major impacts. He is going to be, over the next couple of years, the most outstanding ruckman in the comp.
You'd have to let Rowan Marshall go, though.
That's the thing. The other side of it, from Carl's point of view, is that they would probably pick up a top draft pick as compensation, and they would also have room in their salary cap.
Yeah, but tell me this: the first thing I thought about when I heard the size of the money. Who was the last club to win a premiership because they had a wonderful and expensive ruckman?
Ruckman's, yeah. Look at
Max Gawn. Was that 21?
Max Gawn would be probably the highest earner. Or he'd be in the top 3 anyway in Melbourne.
Yeah. He's probably their best player.
He was pretty good last night. He absolutely dominated. I've seen him probably now two lots of 3 votes for Maxi Gawn, and Melbourne's 2 victories so far this year.
But you go back through the recent premiers. Brisbane have a good ruckman, but he wouldn't be in their top 3 played players. But he missed the grand final.
I think what we're seeing, Jack, is the role of ruck evolving, and the big blokes who just, throw their bodies around and get that first tap on the footy, that first touch on the footy, down to their midfielders and then just sort of sidle out of the way. Those days are over. So Tom DeConning is one of those guys who will go and go again. And because he's so athletic, he can, do those second, third things. Unlike Maxi Corn, he's got beautiful left foot too, so he disposes of it really well. And he just takes marks around the ground. He's 6'8.5", Jack, and 110 kilograms, I should say.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad bet from St Kilda. But you look at the recent
build of a high jumper.
But you look at the recent premiers. Last year, Brisbane won it with a stand-in ruckman. The year before, Collingwood won it with the big American and Cameron, who were
I think Cameron's one of the best ruckmen in the competition.
But now he is. But
not all the time. Yeah, and I believe he's even in contract extension talks. So there's nothing fixed about him staying at Collingwood.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't pay the big American and him anything like 1.7 for the pair.
Oh, it's a big roll of the dice.
Yeah,
it's a big roll of the dice. And when you look at St Kilda's history with this, you'd say maybe this is not the culture you want to play your footy at. But for Carlton, we hope we keep him because he really is something to see.
Mm.
Like I say, just this, he's a very large human being who's just got incredible prowess. So it's not just, we talked about the game and how it's changing and moving away from more of a sort of clearance game, but you're still going to get, I don't know if you saw Carlton against North, but TDK was doing party tricks, little flips out the back and from centre, some centre clearances or at centre bounce downs. And so it is still a big part of the game, that centre clearance. If you're winning 16, let's say 16 to 18 centre clearances, and you're able to transfer those into goals most of the time, you should win or you should be able to kick a winning score. The game has become perhaps more about scoring from turnover and those sorts of things. But again, you've got this ruckman role if you've got someone who's really athletic, being able to get and take those, one of the most important marks, I suppose, for outside of 50 is that mark in the halfway point in the ground when you've got a defensive kick out. And if you're able to take marks in that area, you're able to take pressure off and get the ball out of your defence and moving forward. I don't know, 1.7 million. I think he's worth it, but I don't think it would probably be the best thing for his footy.
No.
All right. NRL, Jack, what do we got?
I missed it entirely last week.
Yeah, it doesn't, mate. It's the global game that doesn't get to Hong Kong. I know the Broncos absolutely belted the Bulldogs last night, and there were a few blokes. I think the Broncos had some injury issues as well through the game, but the Bulldogs, three players: Matt Burton, Satili Tupuania, I just got through that very quickly. It's probably poor pronunciation. And Josh Curran are all facing lengthy bans for acts of various violence last night in the game. Mm-hmm. And today is their ANZAC traditional game, which is the Roosters v the Dragons, of course.
Mm. It used to be at the SCG back in the day. Just a little bit of news. James O'Connor, I saw him score a try after the full-time siren for the Wallabies against the All Blacks to win a Bledisloe Cup game here in Hong Kong back in about 2010, I think. He's now with the Crusaders and did it again last weekend, scored a try after the end of full-time to win the game. Wow. He's just a wasted talent for the Wallabies, I think. He's one that they never quite got enough out of. And Cameron Green made his debut for Gloucestershire last weekend and hit a ton on debut.
Hit a ton on debut. I think he retired at 100, didn't he?
I think he may have, yes.
And hasn't had a trundle yet, but I believe he is bowling in the nets. Look, there's a ton of Australian cricketers making big scores in county cricket at the moment. Victoria's opener, who's played a bit of cricket for Australia, help me out with the name, Jack. He's made a squillion run so far.
Yeah, he's been doubling up actually since and
of course we've got the IPL, and it's just on too late for me, Jack. I mean, I can watch the highlights, but I'm not sitting up till 1 o'clock in the morning to watch the start of a T20 game. Just not.
No. I have a look at the highlights next day.
All right. Well, that does take us out. Thank you very much for your time today, Jack. And we got a little bit. Oh, no, you got one more.
Just before we go, I think this is good for society in general. In the early 2020s, the consumption of meat was dropping because they were all moving to this plant-based stuff. There's really good news. It's gone the other way. The research now shows that nearly 98% of households buy meat and 73% consider it a healthy choice. This is good for the world.
Well, there's no price differential. That's the thing. There's no price differential between, whatever they call it, plastic meat and the real thing. So, you're not saving anything.
And if you pick it up and read the label and you can't work out what it's made of, go back to the butcher counter and buy some meat.
Yeah, well, you sound a little bit like Bobby Kennedy there, but Bobby Kennedy Jr. But you're not saving anything, and as your GPs will tell you, a little bit of red meat not going to hurt you. If you've got a great big, you've got a bit of an obesity issue and fatty deposits on your liver, maybe cut back on those steaks and have a bit of chicken or fish. But I can't understand. That's just the side of the and those the sections in the supermarket are getting smaller and smaller too. By the way, the plant-based stuff. And it just looks like, can you at least make it look like food?
Yeah, it's an idea whose time has come and gone.
A little bit like internet connections on your refrigerator, Jack. It's just a bit of technology we didn't need.
Why would you want to have... I don't want my fridge to talk to me.
that's I know. It'd probably give you a stern lecture.
I mean... Yeah, I don't want it saying, are you sure you need that Asahi can while you're cooking?
We need eggs. Yeah. It was just one of those ideas that everyone thought was a terrific idea. You don't see them anymore. It was just, it was an overuse of technology. All right. Well, we are done for the day. We're going to rush off now and watch various sports. I think South and the Rabbits and the Rabbits and the Roosters are on at 4. Collingwood and Essendon on at 3:20. So we're about to get off and watch all of that. We hope you have a great long weekend. And Jack, take us out.
I did like that all the celebrations, because this year's the 30th year of the Collingwood Essendon games on grand final day.
30th anniversary, yeah.
Yeah, so they went back
must
and
be about
talked
even. They've had 2 draws?
Yeah, 2 draws. Yeah, draw last year and a draw the first one, I think.
Yeah.
And they went back and talked to Kevin Sheedy about it. And it all arose because he picked up the phone and rung Gabby Allen, who was then, in those days, the Collingwood football manager. And I'm rather tickled by the fact that it was a conversation between the two of those, because they had a famously fairly vigorous relationship out on the park.
Yeah, they did. Well, 1990 grand final.
Grand final. Yeah, and even when they played against each other, it was pretty lively.
Very much. Yeah. Well, look, to be fair, Kevin didn't have a lot of mates.
and Gabby Allen was much the same.
I think Robert Wallace still wants to kill him.
Yeah.
So that's just Kevin for you. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Don't forget to drop us a line. You know how to do all that. Don't have to remind you. And we'll be back with you next week. Well, sort of. I've got to be in Melbourne next week, but we'll get there. We'll get there somehow. All right, folks, see ya.
Okay, mate, I got a couple of